The appointment of Indian-American venture capitalist Sriram Krishnan as senior policy advisor on AI in the Trump government has ignited a huge debate on immigrants and job opportunities in America. In the eye of the storm is the H-1B visa. Now, the H-1B visa program was established in 1990 under the Immigration Act to help US companies hire skilled foreign workers temporarily in specialty occupations. It has an annual cap of 85,000 visas, 65,000 for general applicants, and an additional 20,000 for those with advanced US degrees. Non-profits and research organizations are exempt. What are the sectors that dominate the usage of these visas? Well, technology, healthcare, education, and engineering. Which companies are the biggest users? Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and outsourcing firms like Infosys and TCS. Now, what is the debate? Essentially, critics argue that H-1B workers are hired at lower wages, displacing US workers, particularly in the tech sector. They say there have been cases where American workers were asked to train their H-1B replacements before being laid off. Some believe the program is used by companies to save costs. While the law requires paying the prevailing wage, critics allege this is not always enforced. Also, there are times when the number of applications exceeds the cap of 85,000 visas. Like in FY25, there were 442,000 registrations for 85,000 slots, a selection rate of about 19%. In these cases, US Citizenship and Immigration Services conducts a random lottery to select eligible beneficiaries. Now, critics argue that the random nature of the lottery does not prioritize the best and brightest workers. For instance, a software engineer earning $150,000 at a top tech firm has the same odds as a junior worker with minimal qualifications. Now, who are these critics of the H-1B program and what it gives? Donald Trump, his administration, and senators like Bernie Sanders. Who are the supporters? Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Sundar Pichai, and Bill Gates, to mention a few names. What do they say? Well, that the US faces a shortage of skilled workers in STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math fields, and so there is a need for more and more H-1B visa holders. The National Foundation for American Policy, or NFAP, reported that 71% of full-time graduate students in computer sciences at US universities are international students. Also, studies suggest H-1B visa holders contribute significantly to US innovation and productivity. They are often involved in R&D and startup ecosystems. Again, an NFAP study found that 55% of US billion-dollar startups had at least one immigrant founder, many of whom started as H-1B workers. Supporters also argue that H-1B visa holders are highly paid professionals. For instance, the median salary for H-1B workers in computer-related occupations was $132,000 in 2023. So, in this episode, we look at both sides of this debate and what lies ahead. It's Tuesday, the 31st of December. I'm your host, Anirban Chaudhary, and this is the Morning Brief. First, I spoke to Stuart Anderson, Executive Director of the National Foundation for American Policy, whose data I've been citing in the last few minutes. Hi, Stuart. Very warm welcome to the Morning Brief.
Thank you for having me.
So, we are talking about this whole furore about the H-1B visas against foreigners, particularly Indians, the furore that's on in the US right now. Let's start by you explaining to me what's at the root of this.
The arguments against immigration usually feature two parts. Some people argue immigrants don't fit into the culture or that they commit crimes, and other people argue immigrants are taking jobs. The H-1B debate ends up obviously getting more into the belief that there's only a fixed number of jobs, and that if someone new comes in, it means they're going to take a job from someone else. That's obviously incorrect. In the U.S., we've seen well over 1 million new jobs in computer occupations created over the past 20 years, really over 5 million created over the past 20 years across STEM fields, and really many millions more if you don't count those narrow government categories. The immediate controversy came over the hiring of Sriram Krishnan to be an advisor on artificial intelligence as part of a kind of a White House team that would be looking at AI and cryptocurrency. And someone on X had, after the announcement was made, said, "Did you vote for this Indian to run America?" Obviously very inflammatory. And David Sachs, who's heading the AI and cryptocurrency office, defended Krishnan. And Elon Musk later got involved in the debate, because really the debate was not really just about H-1Bs. It was even the fact that he was Indian, and a lot of the people getting involved in this really just don't like immigrants, whatever country they're coming from. But he was also tagged for being in favor of eliminating the per-country caps on employment-based green cards that caused decades-long waits for many Indians. And because, as you know, knowledge of immigration issues are often at the surface level, people started to conflate that with H-1B visas and attacked him. And Elon Musk really got involved in this just last night when he said that the reason I'm in America all along with so many critical people who built SpaceX, Tesla, and hundreds of other companies that made America strong is because of H-1B. But interestingly, Donald Trump came out on the same day in an interview with the New York Post where he said he supports H-1B visas. But I think what we really need to do is to look at what the first executive orders come from the administration in January, because that's really going to tell us what types of immigration policies they might have in some of these areas.
Understood. Right. Okay, let's go into some numbers now. So on denial rates, what was the H-1B denial rate for initial employment in FY24? And let's say, how does it compare to FY 2018?
Well, in FY 2024, the denial rate was pretty low at 2.5%. And in 2018, as you were alluding to in your question, it was as high as 24%. And the reason for that is during the Trump administration, they instituted a whole series of policies, particularly geared at who would qualify for an H-1B visa, but also going after companies if they were providing any services on customer sites, making them provide a detailed itinerary and limiting how long they could stay on a company site. And so because of that, companies ended up suing, and there was a kind of a landmark legal settlement 2020 involving the IT Serve Alliance, which involved many Indian immigrants in the country who ran services companies. And because of that settlement, because essentially the administration lost many cases in which judges viewed their policies as being unlawful, denial rates actually started to go down almost immediately in 2020, and they stayed low since then.
Okay, let's come to the H-1B usage trend in Elon Musk's company, Tesla. How many H-1B petitions for initial employment were approved for Tesla in 24, and how does it compare to, say, FY23?
Well, our think tank looked into that issue because it was, we thought it might be an important issue, and it turned out to have been important because Elon Musk is interested in the issue because of his own background, but he's also interested because his companies use H-1B visas. And what we found is in 2024, Tesla had 742 approved H-1B petitions for initial employment. And that was more than double the 328 total in 2023. And there was a similar number in 2022. But what's really interesting is that was the first time that Tesla emerged in the top 25 list. They were actually ranked number 16, because if you're going to be a successful company, you need people filling all types of positions. And it's unlikely that you're going to be able to fill all of those with just people who are born in the United States.
Okay. Broadly speaking, how many employers received approval for at least one H-1B petition for initial employment in FY24?
This is really interesting that we found that over 30,000 employers in the United States had at least one H-1B approved in 2024, and over 70% of the new H-1B petitions went to employers that filed 100 or fewer applications. What you really find is that there is a tremendous need for talent across the United States in all different types of fields and all different types of employers. And actually, half of the approvals we found went to employers that filed 20 or fewer applications.
If we look at the annual salary range for H-1B visa holders, specifically with relation to tech-related jobs in 2023, what would that be?
Well, the average annual salary for H-1B visa holder in a computer occupation in 2023 was $132,000, and the median salary was $122,000. And it's important to note that there obviously are market wages, and there are also legal requirements to pay an H-1B visa holder the same or higher than as a U.S. Worker. And we find that a lot of the academic studies, actually almost all of the academic studies, when you look at them, find that an H-1B visa holder is paid the same or higher than a U.S. professional. So while a lot of people talk about H-1B visa holders being underpaid, the data really don't show that.
Okay. And do you have figures for 2024 as well?
There's no new data yet on 2024. This is from USCIS.
Understood. And finally, let's talk about the fee hikes that have, been implemented recently if you want to get an H-1B visa. And that includes legal fees that companies need to pay. Can you elaborate maybe with a few examples?
Well, it's really interesting that everyone talks about salaries and tries to say whether an H-1B is paid the right amount, but very few people talk about the additional legal and government fees that employers have to pay on top of that you wouldn't have to pay if it was a U.S. professional. And the fees that we've calculated, that they can be up to $34,900 for an initial H-1B petition and an extension, and really get up to $50,000 if you include sponsoring someone for permanent residence. Now, as far as the recent fee hikes that went in effect in April 2024, employers will end up paying about 70% more just for filing an H-1B petition, about 200% more for an L-1 petition, 129% more for O-1 petitions. And then in addition, USCIS added a $600 asylum program fee to try to cover asylum costs, and companies are actually footing that bill. And so that's when you can see that the costs get very high, and even just filing for an H-1B through the electronic registration system, through the annual lottery each year, that's going up from $10 to $215 for each filing.
Got it. Stuart, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Then, my colleague Annapurna Roy, ET's tech reporter who's written extensively on this issue, spoke to Purvi Chothani, founder of LawQuest and a legal veteran in the field of global immigration.
How true do you think the criticisms are in terms of A, the idea that large numbers of Indians are getting jobs that Americans would otherwise have gotten, B, at cheaper rates, and C, also that they are getting these jobs because of DEI policies at these tech companies? That's diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. How do you see these particular criticisms?
Okay, so now here, let's take one point at a time. The first point you said was they're taking away American jobs. Now, the H-1B law provides that if a company has laid off people in the recent past or has had a strike, etc., there are certain limitations on how they can sponsor H-1B workers. So when we say that they are taking away jobs, I think that that is a very broad statement and needs to be broken down. Now, the H-1B program does not require you to prove that American workers are not available for the job. This is what we call a labor market test. So to say that they're taking away jobs is really not right. The law says that you can employ people with a US bachelor's degree or equivalent to do a job that is a specialty occupation. Now we come to the second point, that they are cheap labor. The H-1B program is very strict about salary. You have to pay the H-1B worker, the foreign worker, the prevailing wage or higher. So a person with similar qualifications doing a similar job in the company, if that person is an American national and you bring an H-1B to do something that is a mirror to that person, then you've got to pay him that person's salary. It may be higher than the prevailing wage, but not lower. So it's not cheap labor. Yes, there are certain instances where companies, and some of them are related to Indian IT companies, have abused the system by pegging these employees at lower levels of salary, because the salary structure is set out at level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Level 1 is the entry-level position, entry-level salaries. As you go higher up the levels, you get paid higher. Your prevailing wage is higher. So let's say a company is employing a person at level 3 to actually do the job at level 3, but is pegging them at level 2. Then they're not paying the person the accurate salary for the job. That is an abuse of the system, and that should not be allowed. I agree with that.
Let's now come to the trends in usage. Of course, IT services companies say that they don't get talent locally, and that's why they need to make use of the system. But
Yes.
over the past decade or so, the data shows that there's been a decline in H-1B usage by at least the Indian IT services companies. Between 2015 and 2024, the new approvals seem to have dropped by about half. What do you see as the main reasons for this downward trend, and do you expect it to continue?
So this is what I remember noticing, is that yes, we had a dip in H-1B approvals during the Trump era one. During the last administration of Trump, there was a dip in approvals. But under the Biden regime, that approval rate has gone up. Now looking at Trump era 2, I definitely believe we are going to have again a downward trend of approvals, and a lot of lawyers, or I would say all lawyers who deal with H-1B cases or other immigration cases, are bracing themselves for Trump era 2. So yes, I think that we're going to have a tough time, but I don't think he will close down the program, because that would be like axing your foot. I very, very frequently use this sentence in conversations like this and in other situations where I say, if the Indian IT workers are harming the US economy so much, let them all, everybody who's of Indian origin, who's an IT worker, go on strike for 24 hours, only 24 hours. And let's see what happens to the country. Because if they are not critical workers, if they are not important to the different functions in the country, it should not harm the country. But in my opinion, airlines will stop. The internet usage will be impacted. The telephone services will be impacted, because the IT workers from India are all over the various industries you can think of. So let's test this. Let's tell everybody of Indian origin, strike work for 24 hours, and let's see what happens.
Right. That's a great point. So just to zoom out a little bit to talk about Trump, with Trump supporters and even in his campaigns, earlier the rhetoric was centered very much around illegal immigration, right? From Mexico, the border wall, etc. But now we've seen that same anger or resentment turn against legal immigration. What do you think the significance of that shift is in public discourse?
So according to me, again, the Trump supporters are divided on this, right? We've got the technocrats on one side and we've got the right-wing people on the other side. The right-wing people, most of them live in rural America. They have a very myopic outlook of the world. They are like the proverbial frog in the well, really don't know what's happening out there. So the comments that they're making are absolutely off the cuff, unthought. unsupported by evidence. Now, this Laura Loomer, she has got some data that she's accessing, but she is twisting it and reading it how she wishes to read it. And it's brought her into the limelight. So immigrant bashing has become like, let's bash them. Because Trump is going to be in power soon, they all have the more wind under their wings to make these type of comments. Under Biden, there wasn't so much of anti-immigration noise against legal immigration. At least I didn't notice it. But under Trump, I think this is what we're going to see for the next 4 years. But Trump is not an idiot. He is very, very smart. He knows that really messing with the H-1B program is not good for the US economy. So with President Trump, it's very hard to predict. Just now it's divided because he has been making a lot of anti-immigration noise. But even in the last 24 hours, he's come out and verbally supported the H-1B program, Musk and Krishnan, and even David Sachs, who's also talking in defense of the H-1B program. So it's hard to predict what's going to come. I think it can go in either direction. My fingers are crossed. I hope for the best that it'll be increased numbers, but I'm prepared for the worst. It could go down to 0 or anything between.
Recently, the final modernization rule was passed, which was kind of Biden's parting move on the H-1B system. And it also had a more relaxed approach towards the narrow qualifications required for specialty occupations. The direct correlation is not required, but a logical connection is required now. Do you think this was done because Biden too was apprehensive about what Trump 2.0 might bring for the impact on businesses?
Yes, definitely yes. That is one factor that would have affected him. Plus, he also realizes that the H-1B program is an important program. But now what's happened is that he has made all these changes. Even he's sort of like made it part of the regulations that deference should be given to prior approvals. And all these things go into effect on January 17, 2025. But remember, Trump takes power on January 21st, 2025. So within the weeks after that, he can actually suspend all these recent changes or announcement that Biden made. We really don't know what's going to happen. Let's wait and watch. That's literally what it is. Let's wait and watch.
Right. It's definitely very hard to tell what he's going to do.
Yes.
So we may or may not see a dismantling of the H-1B regime, but if there were to be a sensible reform of the system, taking into account the criticisms that are coming in, as well as the need for skills, what kind of reform do you think there should be ideally?
So what I think is that we really need to get into a more objective regime, like literally, tick box, A plus B plus C equals H-1B type of thing. That would really make it less political. I mean, it could be open to criticism in its efficacy, but at least there won't be arguments about it's being misused, blah, 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 etc., because it's a very objective test. Of course, that's not good for us lawyers because the more subjective the criteria, the more work we get. But in the interest of the economy, definitely a more objective system would be much better. Also, the numeric cap should be more realistic. Now, let's talk about that for a minute. If you see, every year we are getting about 7-fold. So that means that people are filing that many more registrations every year just for those 85,000 jobs that they can get for an H-1B. Now, when you look at that number is definitely inflated. And one more anomaly in this registration process and the H-1B program is this. When you file a petition for an H-1B worker, you file it in April, between April and June of each year, for a job that starts on October 1st. Now, many of the IT companies have got projects that are lined up in advance, but many of them aren't able to really predict whether that project is going to be active or needs more people in October of that year. So what they're doing is they're really employing these people, taking them on their payroll, and in October, their job needs may change. But the law requires that when you file a petition for an H-1B worker, you should be filing it for an actual job that exists. So the program itself is set up to nurture manipulation, misrepresentation, or lies, however you want to call it. Because the law says you've got to have a job, but how is it humanly possible to predict how many people you need on a project that's going to start 6 months down the road? So there are certain things like that should change so that there's less manipulation, more predictability, more objectivity, and less room for legally nuanced arguments.
So overall, If we look at the bigger picture right now globally, across the US, many European nations as well, we're seeing this sort of anti-globalization or anti-globalist movement, right? With people wanting closed borders, more protectionist measures, etc.
Yeah.
And we can probably place this debate in that context. So
Yeah.
in that scenario, how do you see particularly the Indian IT companies responding or preparing? Do you think they should be diversifying where they have more people or look at different models in terms of talent, etc.?
They should definitely look at different models. And if you see really, even in the IT sector, especially from the Indian IT companies, they've already started hiring more people locally over the past 10 years. It's not a recent or last year phenomenon. So when they're posting H-1B workers on site, either at their own site or third-party sites, I think that they're really important people that they need over there. Because having an H-1B worker in America is not cheap. And think about it. And Infosys sponsors, let's say, 7,000 employees, or out of that, 6,000 get approved and they go over there. Those 6,000 people are now free to look for jobs with other companies. So let's say Facebook is advertising, it's a better payer or whatever. They want to apply for that job. They can switch within days. So if a company is sponsoring an H-1B worker, I think they really want that H-1B worker because it's not a game. It's not toys. It's not playing house. It's real money that they're talking about. And it's significant expenses and inconvenience when an H-1B worker moves to America and then quickly takes up another job. So I think that the Indian companies should look at different ways of doing business, but there is a critical aspect of it that cannot be avoided.
Well, the H-1B debate most critically highlights the disconnect between US immigration policies and the demand for skilled labor. As we venture into the new year, it is likely to be a critical debate around employment in the US, especially with increasing demand for skilled workers and concerns about protecting domestic labor. The future of the program will depend on balancing US economic needs and labor market realities. That's it for today. You were listening to this episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by Vinay Joshi and sound designed by Indranil Bhattacharjee. The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. Wish you a very happy new year. See you in 2025.